Well, welcome everybody to Our Experience, ASCP's podcast. I am one of your hosts, Chad Wers, alongside Tom Hansel.
Panama Tom.
Panama Tom. And we have an episode today with a very special guest, Susan Rodas from GeriMed. I'll let her introduce herself and her career. But we're going to do a little bit of raging against the machine today, talking about all the things that are impacting pharmacy from IRA and a reimbursement perspective, and kind of go through what pharmacy should be thinking about right now. So, Susan, first of all, welcome, longtime member, pharmacist family. Just give everybody kind of an introduction of who you are and how you got here.
It could be a long story, but I'll make it short. So I actually grew up in Michigan. I went to Wayne State University for pharmacy school. Actually met my husband at a Ohio State student APHA meeting. That's where I met him at. He was actually from Kentucky. And I did a residency in hospital pharmacy for a year. And then at that time, there was no jobs anywhere for pharmacists. So I put my resume in every pharmacy or every hospital in Michigan and every hospital in Virginia, because my husband was doing nuclear pharmacy at the time. And so I put it everywhere there, and actually landed on a long-term care, kind of an LTAC in the olden days. They did peritoneal dialysis and IVs and all kinds of stuff there. And they picked up my resume, and I worked for a large company called CompuDose, which is now an Omnicare, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to say that. And they hired me to do that, and I ended up doing everything you could do. I was very blessed. I did billing and consulting and dispensing and everything that you could do. It was 24-hour unit dose back then. It was pretty crazy, literally changing carts out every day. So we did everything, and I really learned the business in the 6 years I was there. And then we ended up moving to Kentucky, because my husband was from Kentucky, and they had basically sold the business to some people, and it wasn't the same business. So we left and moved to Kentucky, and started with another gentleman, Joe Shuddy, who was very much into long-term care, and worked for him. And I've ended up moving over to GeriMed, which is a long-term care GPO and PSAO, and I've been here for 35 years. So I think my experience helps a lot. Having a husband who's a pharmacist helps a lot. Having a lot of people I know to talk to and make sure I'm staying up on everything out there is super important. So I think it's been great. My passion is what I do, and both for the pharmacies to keep them in business, as well as making sure they take care of the patients, because the patients are the ones who benefit from having the great services that the pharmacies can provide to them. And I truly believe that, pharmacy is the biggest part of healthcare that gets ignored. No one gets it, that it's how important it is, and how important making sure that people take their medications correctly can be. And I think that's part of, what our story needs to be in general, is to make sure people get it. It's not just handing a bottle of pills to somebody. It's way more than that. And, not taking your medication ends up having you cost the healthcare system a lot more money.
Absolutely. Well, you've had such an amazing career. You're an amazing pharmacist, having worked with you in various capacities before ASCP and now. You come from an environment, and you can talk a little bit about Joe Shuddy, but you're the face of GeriMed, and you're one of the people that ASCP calls on and other organizations call on when we have issues with, how people are being paid, how they're being reimbursed, what the policies and regulations that are coming out that are going to impact long-term care. And we thank you for that. But you kind of started, I knew Joe Shuddy briefly, but when I was aware of him, and particularly that sort of pharmacy triangle of Louisville, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, he was an amazing leader in pharmacy, and you probably got some really good mentoring from him as you've progressed in your career. But he's legendary. He's legendary in long-term care.
He was a pioneer.
Yeah. And was GeriMed his first business? Was that?
No. He actually started out, he and it's kind of his story is kind of interesting too. So when he was actually a steel worker for a long time, and then he went to school to be a pharmacist, and he started working for Lilly. And he worked for Lilly for several years. I don't remember how many years, but they wanted to transfer him to, like, he had a choice like Boston and Washington, D.C., and all of his family was here. And his wife said, no, you're not doing that. So he had a friend of his that he knew who owned retail pharmacies who also serviced long-term care. And so he somehow got involved with them and bought part of those pharmacies. And then the gentleman, when they had those 5 pharmacies, he decided that he wanted to only do retail. And Joe said, okay, I'll take the long-term care. I mean, brilliant, I mean,
Right.
he brilliantly ended up doing that so that he ended up with all the long-term care. And he actually, when we came to work for him, it was very interesting because my husband and I interviewed with him, and he had just come back from an NCPA meeting, which was NARD at the time.
Right.
And he came in and met with us, and after 2 hours of talking to him, he said, okay, when can you start? And I'm like, you don't want to see a resume? You don't want to talk to references? And he goes, no, I just talked to you for 2 hours. You both are hired. I'm like, okay. So after we finished talking to him, and the big thing I said to him is, please tell me you're not going to sell to some big corporation, because that's what we just had gone through as being sold. And he said, he goes, well, I have no intention of doing that. And then unfortunately he called us into the office a couple of years later, and he had sold to Omnicare. And he said, Susan and James, I'm sorry that we did this, but I had an offer I couldn't refuse.
Yeah.
That's what he said. And I don't blame him at all for doing that. He needed to do it for him and his family. I mean, it was the best thing for him to do. But he definitely was a pioneer. I mean, he had unit dose before anyone knew what unit dose was. They did all bingo cards and stuff in here, and he had an amazing pharmacy. And he got GeriMed. The reason he had GeriMed is because he had a friend of his who was in the hospital buying group side and said that he could do this. And Joe thought it was illegal originally. So he literally had a lawyer friend that he knew that worked for the FTC who investigated it and said, yes, it's legal for you to do this.
Yeah.
So when he found out it was legal, then he started working with it, and he bought everybody else out from that eventually and took it over. When I started, there was six people working for GeriMed. We have about, 35 people working here now. So there was like amazing. 6 people, and they had no pharmacist at the time. So it was kind of interesting. That's kind of why I ended up working for GeriMed. When they found out everything I knew how to do, they were like, well, yeah, this is a good idea to put you in this position. So,
absolutely. No, that's awesome.
Like, okay.
That concept of group purchasing was really, new at the time. That's why I thought it was illegal, but can be some like basic understanding of a few of the initial challenges.
I mean, the biggest deal was when I started, we were getting pricing on branded products that were generic, but the branded products were just as cheap as the generics. And then over 90 happened. And when that happened, they had to give the rebates back to the Medicaid departments. Then they all turned around and increased those prices and couldn't do that anymore. So my biggest thing was I had worked at the hospital doing therapeutic interchange for antibiotics. So I said, okay, well, let's do this for branded products too. And it took off. I mean, it really did. I mean, we did a great job with working with a lot of major manufacturers to get them to give us contracts and increased things out there, things you couldn't do today. I mean, one of the contracts we had was for Cipro, and we had to take we got Cipro into the building, which was not a pharmacy. We had an office building, into the building, and shipped it out to people to put in their ER kits. Huh. Well, you couldn't do that today. So it was a great concept, and it got people to start using Cipro more for patients versus using some of the aminoglycosides and all of those type of things. So it was really interesting how it came along, and it just grew because people started to see its success out there and decided that they really wanted to do branded products to get those out the door, and it helped pharmacies make more money. I mean, that's right. The bottom line. I mean, you're not going to make a ton of money. You might make a good margin on generics, but you're not going to make a ton of money. You're going to make your money on brands.
Right. Which
is part of the problem with this crazy negotiation stuff.
Well, see, that I was just going to say what's old is new again. Like, here we are. Like, yeah. OBRA 90, like, upended drug pricing. Now we're at IRA. It's upending drug pricing. Do you find that as as a GPO, do you find that this is sort of an opportunity because of this whole manufactured rebate side? I mean, the way I've always looked at it, and people have heard me say this, is typically had one payer. Whoever the insurance company was, that's who paid you for your script. Well, now you're going to have potentially, for at least the first 10 drugs and the next 15 coming, two payers. You've got the insurance company payer, and you've got the manufacturer that now can, at least at the bare minimum, refund you the difference between WAC and the maximum fair price. So doesn't that open up an opportunity
for
pharmacies
to do other things?
For pharmacies, yeah.
Definitely to do certain things with therapeutic interchange, for sure. Yeah. And I think it actually, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, for the PBMs, technically it opens an opportunity for them to do different things too. But I'm not sure they get it, to tell you the truth.
Right.
And I'm not sure the manufacturers who have products in those categories get it. Based on my conversations I've tried to get some people like Savesa is a competitor with Eliquis and Xarelto. I haven't gotten, I tried to talk to that company and they're just, not, the light bulb hasn't gone off. Let's put it that way. So it's very interesting to see that that's a part of the whole deal. Now, I think you've got some people thinking about how to make this work. I mean, I've had people ask me questions like, well, does that mean that all our contracts are going away for everything? Well, no, number one, it's only 10 drugs.
Yeah.
So hold on to that. Number two, no one has come back to me and say, sorry, we're not contracting on any of them that are contracted on for those 10 drugs.
Yeah.
Maybe that will happen. I don't know. I don't know if they know what they're going to do, to tell you the truth. So there's an opportunity in long-term care to still have some contracting on those drugs. I don't think that necessarily is going to go away. Some of them have never been contracted. You are not going to get a contract now. I don't see that happening. But I don't see people just walking away from this either. They want to sell their drugs, bottom line. And some people are like, well, they're just going to not give it anymore because they're already giving away the store. Well, they kind of are, but they're not, because they were paying rebates to the PBMs already.
Right.
They're not going to pay rebates on these.
Right.
So what does that mean? I think it means that they have an opportunity. They want to sell their drugs. They definitely do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a strong incentive for manufacturers to want to work with pharmacy, because I adjusted my comment to say, manufacturers have never worked with pharmacy to, I think it was the 50s and 60s the last time, a pharmacy had a direct relationship with a manufacturer. It was obviously before HMOs and managed care, where that sort of got taken away from pharmacy. But this, I believe for some of those drugs, and I think you articulated well, they're going to see it as an opportunity. We've seen the PBMs, at least some of the data that I've seen throughout the Medicare population, is the copays are going up, particularly on those 10 drugs. I don't know that I've seen anything definitive that they've put some on a higher tier level, or they're trying to not, let people have access to those drugs yet. I mean, we'll see what happens, I guess. But there seems to be some, if I'm a manufacturer, I'm like, well, if I want to get my drug out there and used and accessed, I might want to work with the pharmacy, particularly the long-term care pharmacies that have done this before. They've done therapeutic interchange. They've used their consultants to make sure that people have access to the right drugs. I mean, there's an incentive there. Right.
I think you're right, and I think it could potentially be an opportunity. The biggest piece to me is we don't know.
Right. Sure.
It's scary to think that, and I think there's opportunities with the PBMs to figure something else out. Sure. I think there's opportunities with wholesalers. I think that's a piece that maybe a lot of the pharmacies haven't thought about. I mean, granted, you have to pay your bill, every 7, 14 days, whatever your terms are. But maybe you go back to the wholesaler and say, look, I'm not going to have my money for this for at least 21 days. I think I
Right.
need to go back to the wholesaler and say, okay, for these drugs, I'm not paying you, but every 21 days or 45. I mean, I've had people say all kinds of crazy stuff, 60 days, 45 days. I think we're probably talking more like 45 days. I think ultimately is my guess, I guess, educated guess. If that's true, these pharmacies are going to be in trouble if they have high use of these drugs. And I think a lot of them do.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think going back to the wholesaler and saying, hey, is there something you can do to help me out with this? Because I'm not going to get paid for this period of time. I think that's an opportunity for sure. And then,
Do you think,
go ahead.
what have you seen from wholesalers? Like, because I can say from our perspective, they've been relatively quiet about this. I don't know if they're quiet because they don't know what's happening and what to do either. I don't know if they're quiet because, just like pharmacy, like, we don't want to be the ones to carry the burden of this entire program. But they've been relatively quiet.
I think what you said is correct. I don't think they know what to do or how they can help. Based on I talked to all three of the large wholesalers. I think that they don't know what to do. I think they're looking for places to help. I mean, if they don't have us and the independent retail pharmacies out there, they're in trouble.
Right.
They're in big trouble. So I think they got to figure something out.
So Susan, with that said, it doesn't seem like anybody knows exactly what's going to happen and what to do. If you're a pharmacy, you're a long-term care pharmacy, you've got a little bit of runway now. We've been talking about this for 3 years, but you got 6 months before it really is going to get impacted. And someone who, all of us went through the newness of PBMs, the newness of Medicare Part D. And I remember, this being a very similar conversation, like, I don't know what's going to happen. The sky's falling. And at the end of the day, everything eventually fell in place and we're kind of hitting our stride as that new norm. And that took a year or two before that really kind of happened. But what's your advice to pharmacies out there to say, hey, over these next 6 months, I advise you to do A, B, and C in preparation for worst case scenario. And if that doesn't happen, then you're overly prepared.
Well, I definitely, and potentially there could be some leverage for not signing up for the MTF, but at the same time, I think it's important that you have all your ducks in a row to make sure you have that signed up correctly. So to me, especially if you're not sure of what you're doing, go in there and get signed up. I don't think it has any negative connotations because actually there was a letter from Dr. Oz that basically said you don't have to dispense these drugs to be on there. That was actually released this morning, I think, or yesterday. Basically saying, get signed up. There's no negatives. It's not going to cost the pharmacy anything. The big deal is you got to have your data correct. You got to have the right person in there. You got to give bank information. You need to make sure you tell them who your affiliations are with, so that you're with the right PSAO and that you're getting what you need from them. And that you fill it out correctly. And I would highly recommend that if you don't know what you're doing with it, to contact your PSAO and ask them what you should be doing. We're getting ready. We're going to do a webinar tomorrow for our pharmacies just to go over what they need to be doing with this and exactly what the IRA negotiated drugs are. I've had people go, well, I guess this doesn't affect long-term care. Yes, it does. So I mean, I have a lot of people.
That's scary.
It is. I literally had that question. And I think there's a lot of people who don't have the information that they need. If you don't know what it is, then make sure, you guys have your every other week thing like you did with COVID.
Yeah.
Get on there and listen and talk about it. I think it's super important that you get as much information about this as you can and really understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. I mean, this is a law. We have no choice in following a law.
It's coming.
Yes. Now, potentially could they postpone it if everything's not set up correctly? I could potentially see that happening, and I don't see it going away. I think the current administration is not against it. Right. I definitely don't think they want to decrease drug pricing, and they see that as that.
They want the savings. So,
Yeah,
correct.
It's a win for Joe America, and there's just no reason to cancel this law.
Well, and
I think it's more of a win for the Medicare system than it is for anything else.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, they see savings in it. One administration saw that savings and they wanted to use it for one thing. This administration sees that savings, they might use it for another thing. But bottom line is there's too much money in it, I think, for anybody to say, well, we're just not going to do it, or we're going to delay it, or we're going to try to get rid of it. I think it's coming one way or the other. Now, with respect to pharmacies signing up, just to provide some clarification to what you said, Susan, they purposely have said signing up does not mean you have to participate. So they're just trying to get people loaded. I mean, we have between now and arguably January 1st to get all of the pharmacies loaded, test the system, figure out if it's going to work. We don't even have the effectuation plans from the manufacturers until post September 1st. Which is when they have to turn those in. That's an extremely short period of time to operationalize something that is a transactional level program for a Medicare beneficiary. It's a big deal.
And I think another thing that they need to do is had draft 835. Your EOBs coming back to you has been sent back to CMS. They have to review all those comments.
Yeah.
NCPDP, I know, participated in there. I was on a couple of those calls. It's way too much information to go through it every time they had a call. But the call I was on, they had a major issue, or major thing I thought was a major issue, who everybody agreed on the call. They wanted people that if they had any issues with it to contact the manufacturer to get it, to contact the plan to get it fixed. I'm like, pharmacies have no contact with plans. With PBMs, they do, but not with plans. That just was an incorrect statement by CMS. So hopefully a lot of those things got corrected in there. But the other piece with that is your software, whoever your pharmacy software vendor is, make sure that they are working on something to make sure that you can interact your data from the 835s that you get from two places now into your pharmacy software. So you know that claim is completely paid for. I think that's a big piece. I think some of the bigger companies out there, and talking to some of the long-term care, they're setting up two systems to do this. I think the software companies owe it to the pharmacies to set something up that they can just do this through one system and get those 835s in and reconcile those claims. I think that's super important.
100%.
And if you're not reconciling your claims today, which some smaller pharmacies are not doing that, this is the time to get it. There's enough companies out there who do reconciliation of claims. Go find somebody who can help you with doing that. Whether, whatever kind of pharmacy you are, you need to reconcile your claims. It's amazing how many pharmacies out there don't do that. I don't know how they know that they're getting it's like not balancing your checkbook.
Yeah.
Right. You're probably not going to find a lot of errors, but you will find some, and it's dollars in your pocket for sure.
So you referenced Dr. Oz coming out and kind of, pharmacy doesn't always get a lot of attention, even from HHS. The fact that he came out and did a video or a message that said, hey, you can sign up, it's no risk. Obviously, they're either not seeing enough pharmacies signing up, or they're afraid at the slow trickle of pharmacies that are signing up. Does that, and I don't want to put any thoughts in anyone's mind, but do you think that creates any leverage for like NCPA, ASCP, SCPC to go back in and say, hey, listen, they're concerned. They're still concerned. Like, I think, some things need to happen to make them more comfortable, whatever that thing is, supplier fee, a Medicare dispensing fee, whatever it is. Does that give us any leverage, you think?
I mean, it could, but like you said, this is going through. So I don't know what they're going to do about that piece of it. I mean, the bottom line is if you don't sign up, you're going to adjudicate a claim and not get the second piece.
Right.
I mean,
you're not getting
you're
it,
out of that money. So you're almost forced to do this. And especially if you're a long-term care pharmacy and you've got to dispense the drug.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you're going to do. I mean, granted, you can look at other drugs out there, but you got to make sure they're on formulary, or you're not going to get paid that way either. So, I'm very disappointed that when they wrote this and when they put this all together, they didn't think about pharmacy.
Right.
I mean, it's To me, that's the
Disappointed
biggest
but not
piece of it.
surprised.
Correct. You're right. I mean, it happens to pharmacy all the time because, again, no one thinks about pharmacy. It's
Right.
very sad that people don't understand how important pharmacy is and how many people are have the quality of life they could have by taking care of their pharmacy. I mean, look at what Eliquis and Xarelto have done in the marketplace versus taking
Sure.
warfarin.
Right.
I sit there, and some people were saying that, well, we'll just go back to warfarin. Oh, please don't do that.
No.
Please. I just, it's just not a good thing. It really isn't. I've
Well, and arguably,
talked to.
Losing margin on Xarelto and Eliquis, even if it's a little bit, that margin is still much greater than a warfarin script. And
Yeah. Not to mention
if
the labs
anything, it
and
should
everything
incentivize
else.
pharmacies to be more aggressive at, hey, let's get people off, the warfarin that's still being used. I had one pharmacy, this was last year. I had them pull, give me some analysis of how many Xareltos, Eliquises, and warfarins. And they're like, we're only doing, I don't know, $7,000 worth of warfarin a month. And I'm like, yeah, but that's 1,000 prescriptions. That's 1,000 prescriptions. It could be Eliquis or Xarelto. And I'm not saying you're going to convert all of them because you're not, but that's a lot. In the grand scheme of things, you should be thinking about that. You've got to be paying attention at that level at this point, particularly to these drug classes and these first 10 drugs, because you're going to leave money on the table that even if it's less money than you're getting today, you're still leaving on the table. And
Right.
That's, to your point, Susan, this array of things that you need to be doing there's a lot of them, and they're all going to hopefully mean you're still sustainable, you're still whole at the end of the day, but you got to do all of them. You got to be thinking about all of them. You can't just walk in blind and be like, oh, I didn't realize this was going to impact me so much. Because it will.
It's a huge impact to long-term care pharmacies. Just on Eliquis and Xarelto alone, it is a huge impact.
Yeah.
And I think if you only look at that piece of it and don't look at some of the potential remedies from that, then you're in trouble. I mean, you all have done a great job with you and NCPA going back to the manufacturers. I mean, I think, to me, if the manufacturers can pre-fund this,
Yeah.
that would be the biggest deal that they could possibly do. I would love to get fees from them too, but if they can pre-fund it, I mean, to me, there's two issues. One is a decrease in your reimbursement on these drugs. I mean, that's bottom line in long-term care, not in retail. I got, people screaming at me about that. I get it. In retail, they're not making any money on most brand drugs.
Right.
This technically could offer them an opportunity to make a little bit of money, not a lot, a little bit. But long-term care is going to have a decrease in revenue because of this. So, okay. The second piece is, which to me is just as important, is the cash flow issue.
Yeah.
If you have to wait 45 days to get your money and you were normally getting it in 14 days, it's a problem. And it's going to be a problem forever. And I think that's something we were talking to people at CMS. They didn't get that. They didn't understand. They thought, well, once you're through with a month, then you're caught up. No, you're not. You're always behind whatever that dollar number was for the first month. So that's always going to be out there. So if we could figure out a way for these guys to pre-fund this, which I think they could figure out mathematically, financially to do that, I think you're going to be a lot better off than if they don't do that. So if you got contacts in, with manufacturers, and a lot of pharmacies out there talk to them all the time, say that. Let them know that. Let them take it back to whoever the people are that make those decisions too. I mean, I think that would be an opportunity for pharmacies to do that. Let them know. This should not be on the backs of pharmacies. It should be on the backs of the manufacturers, and technically, I mean,
insurers, the
the government, insurers kind of, but they're really in the middle of this too. I hate to say that. I really don't.
I mean, they are, but
they're victims as well.
I feel like it was their it was their rebates that got stripped away. Like that,
correct.
As a generalization, if Eliquis is $500 and they're giving a $300 rebate to the PBM, then really their price was $200, which is what the IRA price is. So, I think to your point, I think manufacturers have some room. They certainly have room to help cash flow. I think they have room for and I still haven't come up with the right term, professional fee, performance fee. There's still something in there that says, hey, we're a good conduit for your product to get to the right people. We're not going to use it haphazardly in anybody and everybody. We're going to get it to the right people. And because we are doing that actively as the pharmacy, we deserve a fee for that or an incentive for that.
Right.
So I think we have to be thinking about that. And what product, I know that comparing healthcare to any other industry doesn't make any sense, but like you buy a computer from Best Buy, you get some service level with it. You buy an expensive medication, you don't necessarily get, from the manufacturer any sort of service fee or video on how to take. Like, they need to be thinking about that, and the pharmacy is the conduit to that. Like, let's make sure this person knows how to inject my product. Let's make sure they understand the product. Like, that's a fee that I think you could argue belongs on the manufacturer side, not necessarily. There's value in it for insurance companies and other payers, but you could argue it's on the manufacturer side, particularly for a brand.
I mean, conceptually, it's the same thing as rebates. They
right.
incentivize pharmacy by providing rebates and, wanting to get more market share.
Right. But I also think, and this has changed over my career, I do think manufacturers care about the utility of their drug now more than they did before. There was a time when it was sell as many as you can, off-label, on-label. I think there's much more attention to, we want to make sure our medication works. So we don't want it used in people where we know it's not going to work or it's going to cause a problem, because that's a liability for us. So I think there's some sense. I'll give a shout out to Acadia. I'll use them as an example. Their drugs for Parkinson's disease psychosis. They are very diligent in their drug supply chain and in their processing of those medications, that you're only using it in somebody that has Parkinson's disease psychosis. Can't be used off label for something else. And, they should, that's the way a company should look at it. Because if I use this drug in somebody I shouldn't, and they die or have a hospitalization, I'm going to be liable for that as the manufacturer to some degree. So I think that creates, again, another aspect of this that says to the manufacturer, be tighter with pharmacy. This is a win-win if you're tight with pharmacy. Even if your incentive to do that is because we hate PBMs, like, good. Let's be friends then, and let's do what we need to do to make sure patients get the right drugs. PBMs kind of own the system of denial and the fact that people are upset that they can't get what they think they need or what they want because they're prior auth or denied or whatever. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think you're right on it. I think that's a good way to look at it for sure. So I think, so you're talking about going ahead and signing up for the program, talking to your wholesaler, talking to manufacturers, supporting. I think it's important to support the people out there trying to do this. I know, SCPC is trying to get a bill through, and hey, I applaud them big time for trying to get a bill through. And that's another avenue to do this. And talking to the administration as well, both. I think people need to understand that this should not have been on the backs of pharmacy. So anytime, any place you can talk to people about this, 100%. I think is a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we recently did that letter to manufacturers with NCPA. We did a letter to PBMs and plans just to set the framework of what we think fair and reasonable looks like. This is fair and reasonable for pharmacy, for long-term care pharmacy, from our perspective. And then, do you think we need a letter? Do you think a wholesaler letter? I didn't really think about writing something from the perspective of, membership to the wholesalers saying, hey, I don't know what you can do, but you need to be thinking about what you can do to support this industry, because it's currently at face value the one that's taking the hit. So how can you help us, wholesaler? I
think they literally could change their terms on what they do with these drugs. There's no reason they can't pull them out separately.
Right.
Why not?
Right.
There's a finite list of NDC numbers that you would do this on.
Correct.
So, I mean, they can recalculate. They have different terms based on like OTCs and refrigerator drugs and vaccines and everything. So why can't they just make this in a different bucket and say, okay, you have 45 days to pay for these drugs versus paying for them in 7 days?
Love that.
I don't see why they can't do that.
All right. Well, we got a job out of this podcast.
Okay.
We have some more work to do.
Got homework.
Tom, any last
Susan,
thoughts?
I was going to ask Susan, outside of her spending, most waking hours on the IRA, what else is Jerry Med focused on? What other challenges are you guys dealing with?
I mean, every day is a challenge. I can tell you that. But I mean, long-term care pharmacy at home is a big deal for us. It's been a big deal. We have a lot of pharmacies that are combo pharmacies, which is, to me, it's an ideal place. Besides discharge medications for large pharmacies, it really is the place where you can do a lot with long-term care pharmacy at home, especially if you're in a rural community and you know all your people and you can deliver medications to their door. I think getting that rolling and getting that set up is a huge priority for us. We've had a lot of roadblocks with that, but that's a big passion of mine. I think it's got to be the future of where pharmacy is going. We don't have enough room for all these people. We've talked about that a million times. 1.6 million beds in nursing homes and a couple million beds of assisted living is not going to cut it just because people can't afford even to be in an assisted living. Most people can't afford the dollars that they have to pay. Plus, I don't think it's necessarily the best thing for people. I think being in your own home, if you can do it, is where you should be.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Well,
So I think that's a big piece of this.
It's a win for everybody. The healthcare system wins because it's less expensive. Obviously, the patient wins because they can age in place. And the pharmacy is just asking to be adequately compensated for providing extra care, special services.
Well, and
Absolutely.
I think the other thing that's happening is it's happening to all of us. Like all of us have a loved one or a friend that is in that gap of I'm not in a nursing home, I'm not in assisted living, I'm older, I have sophisticated meds, and I have challenges because of those sophisticated meds. And that's the place for, what we would call long-term care pharmacy at home. But what we're really saying is there should be more engagement between the pharmacy and the patient at that point. They need some things, whether those things are, 24/7 access or delivery services or special packaging, all of those things, we need to wrap around that particular patient and say, yeah, they need this. I mean, I was on a plane to our Florida meeting and the lady next to me was literally flying down from DC to be with her mom. Her mom was post-hospitalization pneumonia and was not going to take her steroid or her antibiotics. So this lady was compelled to fly down to make sure mom was going to take her meds. And I'm like, I'm not saying that long-term care pharmacy at home would solve this problem, but probably better services around that patient, making sure that they are reinforced that, hey, you need to take this, making it easier for them to take it, understanding why they have to take it, may have saved that woman from having to fly down and sort of do it herself. It just feels like that's a gap. That's a gap in care. Yeah.
And coordination of care to me is so important because I think a lot of these elderly people go to 5 doctors. And if, Dr. A doesn't know that Dr. B is, both of them are prescribing a diuretic and now you got 2 on board. I mean, you're talking a nightmare, a total nightmare. And that happens every day. And to me, the pharmacist is the one to help with coordination, especially if these people, before they get into the type of system we're talking about, are out there shopping their pharmacy.
Yeah.
Because if they're going to 3 pharmacies or they say, hey, I'm going to get these drugs from Mark Cuban's pharmacy and I'm going to get these other drugs from, my local pharmacy down the street. No, wait a minute. I can get a better service from, going to a chain for this one drug kind of thing. I get it quicker or whatever. Now you got a mess on your hands, and I don't think people really understand that at all. So to me, coordination is probably one of the biggest pieces that pharmacies that doing long-term care pharmacy at home can do. I know one of our pharmacies actually down the street here is a Jerry Med member, and she said she had a lady who was literally, she was taking Mobic, and she had a Mobic in her packaging that she was doing, and the lady was still going to get it filled at Walgreens. Oops. So she sat down and talked to her and said, don't do this anymore. This is not a good idea. I already got it in there. You don't have to worry about getting it from anywhere else. You're ready to go. And that to me is a really good thing, because if she wasn't in that program, no one would have talked to her.
Right.
It would have been, she would have continued to take 2 of them.
Right.
Not a good idea.
Nope.
So.
It's everywhere.
Yep.
Well, Susan, this has been great.
You guys champion that for the industry. I know you've been, at the helm of that years and years ago, and it's starting to kind of make that turn a little bit. The biggest question I always get is, well, how many PBMs are really paying for this? And, it's like, I don't want to do it unless I get, the reimbursement. And so it's a chicken or the egg type of conversation. And my response is, the population's there, and they need a long-term care pharmacy and that type of, service. And so the population's there, and maybe right now it's a quantity game more than a quality game when it comes to reimbursement. But eventually, I believe that is gonna catch up. But I know there's some smaller PBMs that you guys work with that have shown
they definitely have stepped up to the table and done some things, a couple small ones. Yep. And the bigger ones are still talking to us. They haven't done anything, but they're not shutting the door on it. So I think that's a positive as well. They're interested in it. I mean, if you look at Medicare Advantage, these guys are in trouble with Medicare Advantage, and they're looking for opportunities to save money. And here is an opportunity handed to you on a platter,
Right.
Pay the pharmacy and decrease your costs in hospitalization and ER visits. Bottom line.
Have you guys been able to produce white papers or any kind of education showing that once it's in place?
It's really difficult to do that because people have more anecdotal data than, real data that they published. If you guys know of any published data out there, if any of the pharmacies that are listening to this know of any, I would love to see it, because it's more anecdotal. We have data that you can look at. We have some people working with ACOs that have real data, but it's still not like a published study. So if there's anything out there that people can point to, that would be great. I think to me, it's kind of obvious. If you take your drugs correctly and you don't go to the ER because you had an exacerbation of your COPD, I mean, here you go. This is money in your pocket.
Yeah.
Kind of a no-brainer.
Well, this is awesome.
CMS pushed the value-based outcomes, and they turned into a penalty. They're going to penalize the nursing home if the patient goes back to the hospital, but they clearly understood keeping the patient at home longer. And that was years ago when they rolled that out into the nursing centers. And so it's the same. It's just driving it permanently instead of just 90 days. We're going to continue trying to keep that patient healthier at home longer to obviously provide better outcomes and less hospital visits.
Yep.
Susan, when's the GeriMed meeting?
It's in November, actually. We decided to skip the hurricane season.
Nice.
So it's actually November 7th and 8th.
Okay, cool. Where's it at?
In Marco Island, Florida.
A good place to go in November.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
We were there actually last year in October, and it was right between the hurricanes. So that's why we moved it to November.
Yeah.
Chad, I'm going to wear my Panama hat down there. You got to get yourself one. We can walk around.
I guess I need to, yeah. I guess. It's summertime. I mean, you have the summer look. It's good.
It's always summer in Marco Island.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you, Susan, so much for being on. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time on Our Experience.